Do you believe in time travel? In case you don't, here are 20 real cases to convince you otherwise. These stories defy all understanding, rendering all our acquired knowledge useless. From the epic tales of Air Marshal Sir Victor Goddard to the disappearing driver of 1988, these stories will take you on a journey into the impossible. Let's get started. Number 20. Air Marshal Sir Victor Goddard's trip to a parallel universe. We kickstart this video with one of the most enigmatic tales involving time travel. Brace yourself, because we are about to delve into a world where impossible does not exist. This tale is of an account in the book, Time Travel, A New Perspective, written by J.H. Brennan. In this book, Brennan tells the story of what can only be described as an accidental time travel. As the story goes, a man known as Air Marshal Sir Victor Goddard flew into a parallel universe by mistake. This is a pretty strange story, to say the least. It was back in 1935, and Sir Goddard was still a wing commander. He was instructed to inspect an inactive airbase that was located in Drem, near Edinburgh in Scotland. What was supposed to be a simple mission turned out to be the single most unforgettable experience of his life. As he flew over the airbase, he noticed that it was in such a poor state. Cattle could be seen grazing on the wild grass that has reclaimed the facility. Everything had fallen into disrepair, but then something strange happened. Sir Goddard suddenly encountered terrible weather, and in order to avoid an accident, he decided to fly back to the airbase. But as he turned to leave, the torrential rain suddenly gave way to clear skies and bright sunshine. This was when he first noticed something was off. As if that wasn't enough, he also noticed that the airbase he had come to inspect had taken on a new look. This time, there was no grassy landscape for cattle to feed on. Instead, it was in mint condition and was in use. Mechanics wearing blue overalls were spotted everywhere as they worked on the numerous planes parked on the runway. To further deepen the intrigue, the planes at this airbase were not the ones in service at the time. Instead, they were newer models, including one that Goddard couldn't identify. What's more, the planes were painted in silver, not the usual yellow. Goddard couldn't comprehend everything that was happening at the time, but 4 years later, he realized he may have traveled into the future on that day. It was 1937. Europe was a war zone, and by a stroke of luck, he had to visit Drem again. Imagine his shock when the sight before him turned out to be exactly the same thing he had seen back in 1935. It was as though he had a premonition at the time and was now living in the reality. While this story may seem too good to be true, the man who recounted this tale was of a good reputation, and we don't really think he would be willing to soil his reputation by peddling false tales. Unfortunately, Goddard died in 1987, so we may never really get to the root of this matter. Number 19. A drive back to the past. This next story is probably going to tickle your fancy. It's a tale of time travel like you've never heard it told. Travel back in time with us to 1988. In this year, the popular Strange Magazine 2 published an article that was written by Ken Moe. It was titled Time Traveler and told a tale that has continued to baffle everyone who read them for many years. This story follows a man who was identified as LC. On October 20, 1969, our friend LC and his business associate Bob, also a fake name to protect identities, were driving along Highway 167. They were headed towards the oil center city of Lafayette after they had had lunch in the southwest Louisiana town of Abbeville, United States. The duo were having such a beautiful drive when they spotted an old turtleback auto that was going really slowly. This car was an antique, so the two were particularly interested. As a matter of fact, cars like these were not allowed on the road unless it was for ceremonial parades. The car had a very distinct bright orange license plate, which had the year 1940 imprinted on it. Inside the car, they saw a young woman who was dressed in what appeared to be a vintage dress from the 40s, complete with a hat and, of course, a fur coat. There was even a small child in the car. As the duo pulled up to check on the car, they noticed the woman go pale with fear. It got so bad that she looked like she really needed help. As Bob and LC tried to talk to her, she wouldn't even roll down the window or look them in the eye. After a while, she pulled over on the side of the road, but before they could get down to go check on her, she had mysteriously vanished. The two were so baffled by what they had seen but they continued on their journey. Later on their trip, they encountered another antique car that was being passed by a modern car. As soon as the car stopped and the driver of the modern car stepped down, the antique car disappeared. It was then that Bob and Elsie realized that they were indeed not crazy. The mystery surrounding this disappearance has never been solved, but for many, she's probably either a time traveler or someone who's stuck in a time loop. Either way, we hope she's okay. Number 18, the news headline from 11 years in the future. The Little Giant Book of Eerie Thrills and Unspeakable Chills, written by Ron Edwards, C.B. Colby, and John Macklin, contains many chilling stories. But one stands out among them all, and it's about a mysterious time travel incident. According to the authors, back in 1932, a newspaper reporter by the name of J. Bernard Hutton and photographer Joachim Brandt were sent to capture a feature story on the Hamburg shipyard in Germany. But nothing could have prepared them for the experience they were about to have. After completing their assignment, they headed out of the premises. This was when the strangest things began to happen. Suddenly, the sound of aircraft engines filled everywhere. When they looked up, the skies were filled with fighter planes bombarding the place. Anti-aircraft batteries opened fire on these invaders, and everything erupted into pure chaos. As the events unfolded, Hutton and Brandt quickly rushed to safety, but they were still baffled as to how things were moving so fast. They even inquired of a security guard to help them understand what was going on, but he only instructed them to leave the area. As Hutton and Brandt drove out of the conflict zone into Hamburg, with their heart in their mouths, things suddenly went back to normal. It was as though the wave of a magic wand had erased all the destruction in a split second. Obviously, the newspaper did not believe their stories. Instead, they were laughed at, and many claimed they must have taken a drink or two on their way back. Fast forward to 11 years later, in 1943, and Bernard Hutton had moved to London. One morning, he read a news article that almost made his heart stop. The story was about a successful raid by the Roy Air Force Squadron on the same Hamburg shipyard he had visited 11 years ago. The scenes were exactly the same way he had seen them back then. Nobody has been able to explain what exactly was responsible for the premonition. It remains a subject of debate and concrete proof that time travel may indeed exist. Number 17. The man who traveled back to the future to meet himself. Okay, this one may sound like the result of an acid trip, but it's worth talking about too. On August 30, 2006, a 36-year-old man by the name of Håkan Nordqvist came back home to find his kitchen flooded with water. He hadn't left the water on, so this was pretty odd. Thinking this was the result of a leak, he decided to crawl under the sink to identify the problem. This was when things took a pretty strange turn. After crawling into the cabinet, he realized that it just went on and on. He kept crawling through the tunnel until he found himself right at the end. When he got out on the other side, Nordqvist found himself in the future. The year's 2042 to be precise. According to him, everything was different and more advanced. The focal point of this trip into time was when he met himself. He was now 72 years old, and surprisingly, wasn't surprised to see himself. Everything was exactly the same, except this version of him was much older. Unfortunately, we cannot really verify the credibility of this story, so take it with a pinch of salt. Number 16. The time-traveling hipster. Historical images often feature significant evidence supporting the theory of time travel, like this photo that was taken back in 1941. It was recently found on the Virtual Museum of Canada website and has generated quite a buzz since it went viral. This picture was said to have been taken during the reopening of the South Fork Bridge in the early 1940s in Goldbridge, BC, Canada. So why exactly is there a gentleman dressed in hipster clothes? This was the early 40s, and the fashion at the time wasn't so advanced. Spotting a man wearing a graphic tee in the midst of 40s-looking people is pretty weird. The man doesn't seem to fit into the picture here. So who exactly is he? Is he a time traveler from the future? Or is there something even deeper at play here? Unfortunately, even after years of research, we still know next to nothing about the mysteries contained within this image. Number 15. Wall Street scam artist. If you could travel back in time, what is the one thing you would do? While many may return to their high schools to give their childhood bullies a proper whipping, a man named Andrew Carlson had a different idea. On January 28, 2003, he was arrested on suspicion of insider trading at Wall Street after his stock market earnings skyrocketed drastically. How drastic, you ask? Well, get this. This man moved from having $800 to making a whopping $350 million within the space of 2 weeks. It was as though anything he touched turned to gold. During investigations, Carlson revealed to the authorities that he was a time traveler from the year 2256. According to him, he knew how to manipulate the market because he had seen it all play out before and was very familiar with the trajectory of the market. Obviously, the cops didn't believe his story, but he was eventually released on bail. This was when things went a little crazy. You see, following Carlson's release, it was as though he vanished from the face of the earth. No one could find him. Several search attempts were launched, but he was gone. Could he have indeed been a time traveler who had completed his mission? We'll leave that for you to decide. Number 14. The Man from Taured. On a hot afternoon in July 1954, the Haneda Airport, now known as Tokyo International Airport, received a strange guest. The man was described as a Caucasian man with a beard. He was said to have been French, but he was pretty fluent in other languages, including Japanese. On getting to the airport, this strange man handed his passport to the Japanese immigration official. Everything was right with the passport, except for the country it was issued from. Apparently, this man was from a place known as Taured. The problem was that there was no country on Earth that went by that name. The passport seemed pretty legit, so this was clearly not a case of forgery. When asked to point out the location of Taured on the map, the man identified a place located between France and Spain. According to him, this wasn't even a new place, as it has been around for over 1,000 years. The location he pointed at is a place now known as Andorra. The man seemed genuinely confused as to why the officials decided to keep calling the place Andorra instead of Taured, which he was familiar with. In order to investigate what exactly was going on, the man was detained in a nearby hotel. 2 professional security guards were positioned at his door to keep an eye on him. Imagine the shock on the faces of everyone, as by the second day, the man had vanished into thin air, never to be seen again. This epic tale joins the list of unexplained mysteries that might serve as pointers to the existence of time travel as a real concept. Unfortunately, it was later discovered that the man was actually using a falsified identity and was actually no time traveler. Number 13. Photo from the year 5000. If you ever take a trip into the past or the future, do yourself a favor and take a picture. This picture may eventually prove vital as an evidence that your story isn't some crazed tale, woven from an over-imaginative mind. Back in 2018, a man who has been identified simply as Edward claimed that he had traveled to the future and came back. According to him, he was part of a 2004 experiment, a secret project of some sort, which sent him into the future. He claimed that was sent 3,000 years into the future and arrived at Los Angeles, which was now an underwater city. Apparently, the whole world had become flooded due to global warming, and mankind's survival was now confined to floating cities. Of all the perilous tales we have ever seen, this one seems to be the wildest. But not to be outdone by the skeptics and naysayers, Edward claimed to have photographic proof of his claims. This picture, he claimed, was taken 3,000 years into the future. But as you would expect, this story has a few too many skeptics. Whether it is real or not depends on who you choose to believe. Number 12. The Moberly-Jourdain Incident. Charlotte Ann Moberly and Eleanor Jourdain were 2 British teachers who had an unbelievable experience in 1901. Their story seems like it had been lifted straight from a mystery novel. One day in 1901, the 2 women were visiting the Palace of Versailles when they had a pretty strange encounter. As they explored the Petit Trianon, they came upon a strange sight. People dressed in clothing from the 1700s began to emerge. Some ancient buildings that hadn't existed since the 1700s also began to appear. To further deepen the mystery, one of the women even claimed to have seen Marie Antoinette in person as she was sketching on the grass. The 2 women were so mesmerized by their encounter that they wrote and published a book about it in 1911. It was titled An Adventure. Although many skeptics have tried to punch holes in this story, it seems to always get more and more popular. Some say they were suffering from a delusion, while many claim they witnessed a fancy dress party. Regardless of whichever theory is correct, this story continues to baffle and fascinate us many years later. Number 11. Noah, the Time Traveler. Back in 2017, a man named Noah came online to claim that he was a time traveler. He claimed he had traveled from the year 2030 and was here to warn the world of doom. He was even put to a lie detector test, and he passed, much to the astonishment of everyone. But this wasn't the end of this saga. Later, this Noah appeared in a video with another Noah from 2070. Together, the two Noahs provided a description of how things worked in the future. They claimed that cars were now much faster, and that they were strangely pushed by the road. This is pretty laughable, because that's definitely not how technology works. The duo also informed the world of the technology that was in abundance in the future. This included advanced AI, a manned mission to Mars, which we are sure Elon Musk is pretty pleased to hear, and of course cures for cancer. But soon, the story came crashing down like a pack of cards, when a man named Jason came out to claim that he had been behind the stunt from the start. He had us fooled for a second there now, didn't he? Number 10. John Teeter. Sometimes time travelers don't just come bearing stories of the future, they also come with instructions on how to get to the future, or at least instructions on building the time machine. Back in the early 2000s, a man who identified himself as John Teeter gained popularity online after he began to release information on how to build a working time machine. One of the major hurdles in the field of time travel is the difficulty associated with building a machine capable of achieving such monumental feats. But this man seemed to have cracked the code. John Teeter claimed that he was indeed a time traveler, a US soldier from the year 2036. He claimed he was in a parallel timeline and even shared grainy images of his time machine. As expected, the man came with warnings from the future. According to him, the United States would be plunged into a civil war that would erupt from a 2014 conflict and become a full-blown war in 2018. Obviously, this one turned out to be a sham because his predictions never came to pass. Also, investigations revealed that John Teeter was probably entertainment lawyer Larry Haber, so this one is pretty much a falsified story. Number 9. The Montalk Project. If you love the series Stranger Things, then you should know that it was most probably influenced by the book, Experiments in Time. The book was written by Preston B. Nichols and Peter Moon, and it seems to contain many wild tales. In this book, which claimed to not be a work of fiction, Nichols shared several of his alleged experiences at a place called Camp Hero in Montauk. Here, he said experiments were being done on kids with psychic powers. According to him, these experiments opened portals to other dimensions and times, and through them, people could visit other planes of existence and travel to lost times. Another epic tale contained in the book is the story of Al Belek. Al Belek was part of the famous Philadelphia experiment back in the 1940s. The program was said to have supposedly teleported the battleship USS Eldridge through time. Wild tales, right? But who are we to judge? The truth may actually still be out there. Number 8. The flip phone at the 1962 World Cup. The triumph of Brazil over Czechoslovakia in the 1962 World Cup final was only dwarfed by a mysterious image that emerged from the event. In an image that was originally supposed to feature the Brazilian captain Mauro Ramos as he held the trophy high, something else caught everyone's eye, and it's so hard to unsee it once you see it. One man in the media scrum appears to be holding a flip phone. This wouldn't be a problem, except for the fact that flip phones didn't really come around until around 1996, or thereabouts. So how could such tech have existed in 1962? The only reasonable explanation seems to be time travel. Maybe this man was from the year 2007, when the Motorola Razr ruled the world. Or maybe he was just holding a box camera. Number 7. Rudolph Fence. Here's an urban legend that has been around since the 1950s. This one follows the story of a man named Rudolph Fence. Not much is known about this man except for the fact that back in 1951, Fence was hit by a car in New York City. At the time, he was said to have been wearing 19th century clothes, which didn't really fit into the world that he was in. What's more, deeper investigations revealed that the man had been missing since 1876. To further deepen the mystery, the items that were found on the man seemed to corroborate the fact that he had traveled through time, from 1876 to 1951. Unfortunately, this turned out to be another idle tale. This one in particular was lifted from the tale I'm Scared, which was written in 1951 by writer Jack Finney. Number 6. Ancient Greek status with laptop. Archaeological sites often provide us with information about the mysterious events that have taken place in the past. Sometimes they can also manage to capture the activities of time travelers. Check out this ancient Greek statue, known as Grave Niscus, of an enthroned woman with an attendant. The statue is located in the J. Paul Getty Museum in Malibu, and it seems to feature a woman using a laptop. To further deepen the mystery, the laptop-like figure seems to possess the typical USB ports. Many people began to peddle tales of a time traveler who has traveled back in time with the tech of the modern world. However, this was quickly deemed a hoax. According to Jeff Hurwitz, a professor of art history and classics at the University of Oregon, the USB ports were actually drill holes used for the attachment of a bronze object or a separate piece of marble. So, what about the laptop itself? Not surprisingly, it actually has a simple explanation. It is in fact a shallow box or lidded tray, and the woman holding it was about to select a piece of jewelry. So, no ancient laptops here. That's a huge loss for conspiracy theorists. Before we go on to more mysterious stories, here's our subscribers' pick for today. In 2016, this photograph was posted on a Facebook group related to Island. Till this day, the mystery contained within the photograph has remained unsolved. The image was said to have been taken in 1943, during the Second World War. You can see the soldiers moving about, setting the scene for the era. But you will notice a mysterious figure who seemed to be talking on a cell phone. But this was 1943, and cell phones weren't invented yet. So, how could this man have access to a gadget that hadn't even been conceptualized at the time? Quite frankly, we do not know. What do you think about this image? Share your thoughts with us in the comments section. Now let's get back to the video. Number 5. Woman using a cell phone at a Charlie Chaplin premiere. In a DVD extra of the Charlie Chaplin film, The Circus, a brief scene was captured that has gained even more fame than the movie itself. The scene captured a woman at the premiere of the movie at Grauman's Chinese Theater in Los Angeles. While this would have been a normal scene, it was filmmaker George Clark who pointed out a woman that seemed to be out of place with the rest of the setting. The woman appears to be talking on a cell phone as she walks through the frame. But this was 1928. So how exactly would a cell phone have existed at such a time? Time travel? Maybe to some. Unfortunately, the answer is pretty boring. Turns out what the woman was holding was actually an oblong hearing aid. How exciting would it have been, however, if the footage actually contained a real time traveler? We can only dream. Number 4. Nicolas Cage and his Civil War doppelganger. Imagine seeing an ad for an antique Civil War-era portrait on eBay, and when you check the price tag it says $1 million. Now, what image would be so valuable that it would be worth that much money? Well, not if the image captures the action star Nicolas Cage back in 1870. The image was said to have been captured in Bristol, Tennessee, although the identity of the man in the image remains a mystery. As the portrait surfaced online, it went viral, attracting speculations and theories from all angles. Jack Mord, the eBay seller who listed the portrait, joked that Nick Cage was probably a vampire. In response, Mr. Cage claimed that he doesn't in fact consume blood, nor does he lack a reflection when he looks into the mirror. The resemblance is so uncanny it almost seems true. Number 3. Mobile device in 1943. Sometimes the credibility of an image that's purported to have captured scenes of time travel can come into question. People dismiss these claims by attacking the validity of the image, claiming that the photograph may have been cleverly manipulated. But what if the photograph in question passes all the tests of credibility? What then? Take this image from 1943, for example. It captures a scene of holidaymakers on Towan Beach in Newquay, Cornwall. When it was uploaded on Twitter in November 2018, people were quick to point out a man who seemed to have been operating a mobile phone. The tweet went viral instantly and was picked up by news outlets like Fox News and the Daily Mirror. However, the original poster eventually came back online to disprove all the theories of time travel surrounding the image. According to him, the man was actually rolling a cigarette, not working on a mobile phone as many have chosen to see. Once again, another loss for conspiracy theorists. Number 2. The Expected One. This is a painting made way back in 1860. Known as The Expected One, this work of art was painted by artist Ferdinand Georg Waldmüllerin. But there's something peculiar about this particular work of art that has led to lots of speculations online. The painting depicts a young girl walking down a prairie path as a young boy waits at the upcoming corner to surprise her with a flower. However, the pose and seeming unawareness of the girl seemed eerily familiar. It was as though she was looking down at a smartphone. When this image went viral online, people had quite a lot to say about it. While the credibility of the painting itself cannot be called to question, the question of perception and forced imagery was heavy on everyone's mind. But as it turned out, this young lady was in fact not looking down at her phone. According to the CEO of the art agency Austrian Paintings, what the girl in the painting was holding was actually a little prayer book. as she was depicted on her way to church. This may have settled the clouds of confusion, but we can't help but marvel at the eerie resemblance that this painting has with our modern lifestyle. Life truly imitates art, right? Number 1. The legend of Bob White and Tim Tones. Earlier in the video, we talked about a man named John Teeter, who claimed he was from the future, but this man is not the only one who has apparently traveled back through time in their own time machine. Between 2001 and 2003, a man named Bob White or Tim Jones sent out numerous spam emails to random email addresses. The subject of these emails was always the same, and it carried a strange request. The man claimed he was seeking for someone who could supply what he described as a dimensional warp generator. Apparently, he was a time traveler who was stuck in the year 2003. Other times, he claimed that he was seeking for help only from fellow time travelers. It was later discovered that the man behind the mystery was a professional spammer, Robert J. Tadino. The story eventually died down, although many of us would have been more excited if indeed it was a case of a real time traveler. Thank you for watching this video. See you in the next one.